Welcome. This is a video to help charter schools train staff who deal with parents about special education and how to serve students with disabilities in charter schools. We're hoping to use this video to help you promote access and choice through inclusive language in charter schools. My name is Alex Medler, and I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Association of Charter School Authorizers. We help Colorado school districts and CSI with all of their practices in charter school authorizing. And a big priority for us is making sure that we can improve access, services, and outcomes for students with disabilities in charter schools. And with me is Kaci Coats. Kaci, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yep. I'm Kaci Coats, and I work at the Colorado League of Charter Schools and support schools across the state with serving their diverse learner populations, including special education, students with language needs, etc. And I'm really excited about this topic. Obviously, given my background and my focus, this is really important to me. But through this training, we're hoping to educate public charter school staff on their obligation to enroll and educate students with disabilities. And secondly, to provide talking points that will ensure that your communication with parents aligns to anti-discrimination policies and state and federal requirements.
Why is this important now? We think this is actually a timely issue for charter schools and authorizers to be looking at. One thing is that the Schools of Choice Unit and the Colorado Department of Education commissioned a study, which was conducted by the Center for Learner Equity, which is a national center that has great expertise on this. They were able to clarify for us that Colorado actually has the highest, the lowest proportion of students with disabilities in charter schools measured by IEPs. And we have among the highest gaps between traditional public schools and charter schools in terms of the number of kids with IEPs. So whatever's going on in Colorado, other states are doing a better job of giving students with disabilities full access to the choices they have. And in Colorado, public school choice is a big part of our public school system. And it's not acceptable if students with disabilities aren't enjoying that choice as well. Also, we have a round of investigations started by the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. At this point, they have identified at least 31 charter schools that ask parents about their students' disability status prior to enrollment. And for our friends at the feds, it's important that we not ask about disability status or that we not use that information when we make enrollment decisions. There's lots of times and things to work out the details of how to serve kids, but we don't do it during the enrollment process. And at this point, at least on the websites, some charter schools are doing that, which we think links to other practices in the charter schools and in the districts that create obstacles to enrollment. And finally, for the authorizers, charter school renewal also touches on services for students with disability in the enrollment. And it's an important thing for districts to have a chance to interact with the charter schools about it and provide feedback and figure out how to improve things. Kaci, how about for you? Why else is this important now?
Yeah, I feel like this is a common topic that gets brought up when there is some form of charter opposition or negative reputation. And so this is just this conversation needs to be had so that we can continue to positively combat that message that charter schools don't want to serve students with disabilities. We know that isn't true, and we just want to make sure that our practices are aligned to our beliefs.
Great. Well, I would add that we have to address the myths and sort of the things that people in the field say about charter schools that when they're misinformed. And so us doing this right is one way to counter people who honestly come across mistaken beliefs and think that charter schools don't have to serve kids with disabilities and don't do so.
Correct. All right, so just to get us started, I just want to remind you all that Colorado charter schools are public schools and receive federal dollars to educate students with disabilities. So this means that charter schools in Colorado are required, all of them are required to enroll and educate students with disabilities. Now, the level of severity of disability that a charter school is required to enroll is dependent upon the local authorizer or the district to determine, but at least 90% of students with disabilities should be able to be educated by the public school they choose, including charter schools. So we just want to make sure that everyone's really clear on our charter school obligation as a public school to serve these students.
Great. So we're going to talk with you today about ways to communicate, and I wanted to be clear on some of the big outcomes that we are trying to achieve with this communication. Number one is to affirm the commitment of the charter school to welcome and serve all students, to not discriminate against students with disabilities. Number two is to offer access to resources and direct them towards things from state and other authorities to help them navigate school choice and understand their rights and the districts and the charter school's responsibilities. So not trying to make it up all on your own, but also refer to and work with other materials and offices that can help. Second or third is to direct families that have questions about special education to the right people. So special education law and policy can be complicated, and there are subtle details that need to be explained carefully, and that can take more training than many people in the charter school front office have. So we want to make sure people know when to hand off a discussion and say, hey, you should talk to our school special ed director or our principal, because they don't know the answer to that. And fourth, we want to communicate clearly how the details of the enrollment process work. One of the things we're trying to counter are parents who come in with misconceptions in their mind because they heard something from another parent or from a different school or somebody who hates charter schools. So we want to make sure that the real process and the details of how enrollment happens for students in general is described clearly, and how enrollment and services and education for kids with disabilities work. So those are the points we're trying to get across in the following questions. And ultimately, we're trying to avoid miscommunicating or discouraging enrollment or asking for learning plans or other details prior to enrollment. There's an appropriate time to ask for those details, but it's not until after the student has been enrolled. And certainly that does make for challenges during later on in the year and figuring out when you do go through the process of getting your school up to speed to educate a student with an IEP or a 504 plan, but we want to avoid miscommunicating along the way. So what we're going to do next is we're going to model for you some of the communication. I'm going to play the role of a parent, and when I play the role of a parent, I will put on my parent hat. And I will ask questions to Kaci, who will be playing the role of a charter school staff person. And then we will debrief those questions a little bit and see how they went, so that you have a chance of how to talk about this with regular language. All right, you ready, Kaci?
I'm ready.
All right, I have my parent hat on. I heard charter schools don't serve kids with disabilities. Is that true?
That's actually not true. Charter schools are public schools, and while there are many things that they're not required to do that the district might do in their other schools. One of the things they have to adhere to is all state and federal policies or laws and that includes serving students with disabilities. So therefore, we cannot discriminate and must welcome applications from families of students with disabilities.
That's good. So I do think schools are different and they have different approaches. You know, what kind of students is your school designed to serve?
So
what kind of kids do well there? Yeah.
You know, we try very hard to make sure that when we're communicating with families that we are open and welcome to all students to apply. And after, because we don't want to send a message that they are not welcome at our school. And so we often try to avoid saying there's a specific kind of student that does better in our school. Instead, like if you would like to come and hear about our programming, we can support with sharing with you that information. But we don't want to say that there's a specific kid that does best, because you just never know. All kids can do well in our school.
Right. Well, I do hear a lot of conversations that talk about, the fit between a kid and a school. And like one of the things we're trying to avoid is having charter schools subtly counsel out students from even applying. So how do you manage the issue of the discussion that we have in Colorado, pretty often about, well, this is a school that does X, and this may not be a good fit for your child. What's the appropriate way to handle that sort of impulse?
And I'm assuming you took off your hat because you're not a parent.
I'm not in my parent mode. I'm in my policy nerd.
That's right. All right. So I would say it's absolutely wonderful for a school to share what their mission and vision is and what their model is. I think the one thing that I encourage them not to do is to say what type of kid they aren't good with. And so what kid wouldn't fit into our school? So you can say the strengths of our model, the great things that our model has, but anytime we start moving into this conversation around who is and who is not a good fit for our school, that can easily send the message to families that we don't want your kid at our school, or actually, it leads to them not enrolling or even trying to apply. So we want to keep that prior to admission. We want to absolutely share with them information about our school and our model, but not designating which type of kid we are best serving.
Good. All right, next slide, and I'll put on my parent hat again. At the old school, my daughter was given more time for assignments and her quizzes. Can you do that?
Well, if that was something that was on the IEP at a charter school, because we are a public school, we are required to meet all IEPs, the individualized education programs, as well as 504 plans or any other, English language learner plan that might have been created by the state. So we are required to adhere to those. And if that is written in the plan, then we are required to meet that expectation as well.
That's great. Taking off my parent hat. One of the things I did there was not say my daughter had a 504 plan, but I talked about things that are often in a 504 plan. And as far as the Office for Civil Rights is concerned, asking about the details of a student's 504 plan or IEP without labeling it that way is the same as asking, does your kid have a 504 plan? So you don't want to either ask for the details about that, and to the extent you do find out about it, you want to make sure people know that you're not using it to make any admissions decision. I really like the idea that being clear that you can provide the services and resources that are in those plans. What do you think about that, Kaci? Is it, how do you have an authentic conversation between parents and the school that doesn't, they want to talk about their kids and the school, but how do you handle that appropriately around things like the plans or services?
There are definitely times that families might signal to you that there is an IEP involved, like you just said, extra time. Those are typically something that is on an IEP or a 504 plan. And so we're not going to, we're going to assume that when we're talking to them, that if they're asking for more time or some kind of accommodation, that it's coming with a plan, but we're not going to ask them for details of that plan in that conversation. Instead, we can just share with them what we would do. So we can say, if the student has an IEP or a 504 plan, we are required to meet those expectations outlined in those plans. But again, not asking for more specifics. And you don't have to say, do you have an IEP or 504 in order to answer that you will meet those needs.
Next slide, and I'll put on my parent hat again. All right. So, the reason I'm motivated, the reason I'm looking for a new school has been kind of frustrated with our current school. They don't give my son all the services that are written in the IEP, and we're always arguing with them about trying to get them to provide the services. Are you able to, do you have the resources, the staff, are you able to do what's written in my kid's IEP if I come here?
This is a bit complex and very specific to each kid. So once your child enrolls, we start by implementing the IEP from the previous school. So that's the get-go. We get right into serving the IEP as is. However, we can decide, or you can decide, that an IEP team needs to reconvene to discuss any concerns you had previously at your previous school or any current concerns. And we can also have that same conversation of perhaps there need to be some additional supports or changes or edits, but as a team, we will discuss that with you.
Okay, taking off my hat. So one of the things I sometimes hear from charter schools, and I think I heard it more before, not as much lately, is a sort of a claim that we individualize education for every student, so we don't need your old IEP. What do you think about sort of an impulse that says, oh, you're at a charter now, it's a smaller place, you don't need all the things you had in your old IEP?
Well, I would caution folks in saying that and ever encouraging a family to get rid of an IEP. That IEP is a legal document that is there to protect that student's rights to the specialized programming that has been outlined for that child. So even if the school, has this great individualized approach, what if the child leaves and goes to another school? We want to make sure that we're adhering to that IEP, making sure that we're collecting data on it. so that in the event that the child needs to go somewhere else, or we need to access additional resources for that student, we have a legal document to support them. I would also say this is a topic that perhaps your front office staff does not need to be answering on their own. And this would be a great time to say, I really don't know the answer to that question. Let me get you in touch with our special ed director at our school, rather than trying to answer that question, because that does get a little tricky and much more complex for students.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I think it's always fair to punt for a person in the charter school who's talking with a parent. And if you're not sure what the answer is and you don't have a good confident answer about what's right, then punting is better than making it up for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, next slide. All right, this part gets to something that is a little more tricky and often will lead to needing to hand it off to somebody else. But let's say I'm a parent, comes in and says, you know, my kid is pretty special. She needs a lot of services in their current school. What happens if I decide this isn't really, you know, the right place for my kid, or you know, I need services that you can't provide?
So those kinds of conversations and those decisions, we will always make those within the context of an IEP meeting. So you are a part of the IEP team. We will make sure that you are included in those conversations, and we will also likely bring in our district support in order to make sure that we have their support, their resources, their guidance on how best to support you in those decisions, whether it is staying at our school and perhaps we need to provide you more supports through our relationship with the districts, or perhaps there is something better that the district can point you into the direction of. Again, with the district support, we would not have that conversation without you at the table.
And then, so, you know, I've been fighting with the district for years already about this. And I kind of, you know, that's part of why I'm coming to you. So I could end up, you know, applying and I still might not be able to have my child enroll in your school. Is that what you're saying?
Ideally, we would love to be able to support all students in our school. However, if the district deems that the resources or the supports are better for your student at a different location, that is between you and the district, as well as our support in getting you in the right location. However, we will do everything in our power to support you within our school.
That's great. Taking off my parent hat. I mean, I think this is one of the challenges technically for districts and charter schools to work out what kind of disability raises to the level where the district would be making a decision to locate services somewhere else. And I do think it's difficult to talk with parents. One of the points I think it's important to realize, and this gets to the 90% of kids with disabilities can be served just about anywhere, is that sometimes charter schools jump to the conclusion that a kid with a disability has such a severe disability that it's the district's responsibility and they won't have to serve the kid, or they can't serve the kid. And I think that's perhaps happening a little too often in Colorado. And so that's where we need to communicate about this carefully. And the more we can make sure that the parents aren't being discouraged prematurely based on someone's sort of uninformed sense of what is severe enough to have to go somewhere else. So what do you think about how to, again, it's an important area to refer to other people, but what's a good way for the staff people to think about, you know, how many kids, what type of kids they can serve? What do you tell the schools?
I would say if you are a front office staff, the key line that you keep coming back to is we do our best to serve all students at our school. And then I would, first of all, send it off to the rest of the conversation off to your special education director or your leader in your school so that they can have more sensitive conversations or more specific conversations with the family. But this is a pretty risky topic anytime. And I would say avoiding, as a front office staff or a non-special education trained person, avoid talking about placement, even though I just did. But if you're the front office staff, avoid talking about placement and moving that to someone else who has more knowledge, because you don't want to ever miscommunicate that if you could enroll and we're going to kick your kid out right away, you know, that we don't want to send that message to families. We want to just your job is to keep reiterating, we are working hard to serve all students with disabilities in our school.
Sounds great. Let's go to the next question, which is, before I put on my hat, more about something about a family that does have a student with a pretty severe disability, or at least that could be the case, and needing to handle that right. So I'm going to come in and say, hi, my son is very special. He's great, and he has Down syndrome. Can you guys serve a student with Downs?
I would actually prefer to connect you to our special education lead. Her name is Kaci Coats, and she can provide you a lot more information about our specific programming and how best we support all of our students with disabilities in our school. And so let me just connect you to her.
Okay, I'll talk with her. Thanks. All right. In addition to referring people to your trained folks on staff, let's look at the next slide. I think the other part for me here is making sure that there's lots of other resources available. At CACSA, the Colorado Association of Charter School Authorizers, we have materials for authorizers for how they work with their charter schools, how they monitor them, how to look at contracts, how to look at applications, and how to bring it up during renewal. So we have a bunch of resources that a district can use when they're interacting with a charter school to try to strengthen services and streamline things. I do believe for those in the charter schools, one of the things to do is to get as much clarity with your local district as possible. And so strong charter authorizer relationships are really pretty key to this. And I would look at some of those resources from CACSA. And on the school end, Kaci, what would you suggest?
Yeah, the league through the collaborative has developed a lot of services and resources, along with the things that we've worked on with Alex at CACSA. I would say one of the best things you can do is do a special education enrollment review, and that'll help paint the picture of what are the messages you're sending through your website, through your policies, even just the perceptions out in the community about the school and their willingness to serve students with disabilities. So that is one thing that we offer. We also do offer ongoing liaison work. So if there are times that you are working with your district and there's confusion or a misunderstanding of what you should and shouldn't be doing at your school, and you want someone who does have more knowledge on that, that's one of the things that Alex and I really enjoy partnering with schools and districts on, is to help them figure out how best to maintain that strong working relationship, because we do believe that that strong relationship leads to great programming for students. So would love to support you in that way. I've also added contact information if you'd like to reach out for more support or resources or just thought partnership. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I just want to add for one thing. I mean, sometimes charter schools are anxious of their districts and they feel like, well, they're looking down as they're the overseer and I can't share with them what the challenges are. I think this is one of those areas where we have to get past that, and the districts and the charter schools need to assume the best of intentions on both sides, figure out ways to work together and to be clear, and then figure out how to communicate that to the parents. One thing that frustrates me is when I find someone who doesn't really understand charter schools in the field, like a layperson. They say, oh, well, charter schools just can discriminate. They don't have to serve all kids and they don't provide special ed. And other parents hear that too, and they come to think that it's true, even though it is far from the truth and not what the charter schools or the districts want. So one thing to keep in mind is that when someone comes into your school, they may be misinformed by everybody else and think things aren't the way they should be. And I think it's up to us in the district and the school to counteract that wrong narrative and make sure parents come out of their interactions with the district and the school fully informed about their rights and services they'll get. So this is a way that we have to overcome some of the things that are in the field by the way we all behave at authorizers and in charter schools.
Absolutely. And I would also say I've recently had the pleasure of 3 different focus groups that we met with families, and the stories that these families have when trying to navigate school choice, it's pretty heartbreaking. So one of the things I like to remind folks is that when you are in a school front office staff, you are the first point of contact for families of students with disabilities, and you have the power to build a bridge, make them feel welcome, support them in navigating school choice, rather than creating more walls and more barriers for these families to overcome. So just keep that in mind. They have plenty of barriers, plenty of walls that they are already navigating in life. And just really encourage you to be a bridge builder and support these families. We really appreciate your time. We know this is hard work, and we know we're constantly getting better at this, and we would love to partner with you in any way. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.